Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday to you. My name is Tim Harris. It's 10 o'clock. It is the end of another good week in the Word. It's been good. We're in the book of First Kings, mostly in the stories of Elijah. And honestly, I've really enjoyed the last few days with you. Today is okay, just to be honest. It's chapter 20. It's a long chapter. First Kings chapter 20, verses 1 to 43 for today. It is still the saga of Elijah the prophet, but I don't know where Elijah is today. This is like an episode of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when the Fresh Prince never shows up. Elijah's not in any of these episodes. However, there are several things that happen in the course of this passage that sort of are important and set us up for things in the future. First off, let me go back to yesterday. Elijah, had been before the Lord. We talked about how he had, been very just demoralized, depressed, and God sends him back with a greater commission. One of those tasks was to anoint Hazael to be king of Aram. I don't know that it's ever recorded that he does that, but we do know that Hazael will seize power a long time from now, so years down the road. So for now, we still have to deal with King Ben-Hadad of Aram, and that's where the story begins here in chapter 20. King Ben-Hadad of Aram mobilized his army, and then notice there, supported by the chariots and horses of 32 allied kings. Now, that's verse 1. Later on, we're going to find out these are all just like a bunch of drunken rednecks. I mean, this is not a formidable army, but they sound good going in. You know what I mean? When I read that, he's got 32 allied, nation states. They're not named, but still, and they got chariots and horses. I mean, that's like talking about tanks. I mean, chariots are tanks, back in their day. And so this sounds like obviously Ben-Hadad is the aggressor. And at this point, it sounds like a no-win situation for Ahab, the king of Israel. And so understand some of this is bluster. Some of this is the way, especially in the Middle East, in the ancient world, kings would threaten and talk back and forth. I'm going to take all your women. I'm going to take all your children. I'm going to take all your horses. Some of this is bluster. Some of this is actual threat. But at any rate, this is how it begins. King Ben-Hadad puts Samaria under siege, surrounds the city, and then sends word to King Ahab, your silver and gold are mine, so are your wives, and the best of your children. I'm going to take your good kids, not your bad kids, And it's interesting how Ahab just says, okay. I'm sure his wives are thinking, well, thanks, honey. I mean, he just says, okay, you can have my wives. I'll send my wives and my best kids out with, my credit cards and, you can have, he just concedes everything at this point. And that's really interesting. Again, the only explanation I have is, 32 nations have all allied against you. And so at this point, he may feel like he's buying time by sort of, conceding those terms, or he may literally be just, not have any fight in him. At any rate, Ben-Hadad sends his message back and says, hey, yeah, okay, thanks for that. And now also, I'm going to be sending my guys in, my goons, and they want to come in and just, walk through your bedroom and take all your stuff. I mean, that's what he says. They want to search your palace, the homes of all your rich people, all your officials, and they just want to take all your stuff. At this point, Ahab has to go before Congress. It says the elders of Israel, but yeah, it's like the Senate. In other words, King Ahab has some power as far as war goes, but not total power in Israel. And so he calls the Senate in to talk about this. And he says, man, I got the king breathing down my neck. I've already told him he can have my wives and kids and my silver. And the elders, the Senate says, no, we're not going to We're not going to negotiate with a terrorist. We're not going to concede anything to this bully. No, go back and tell him no, you know. And so Ahab does that. He goes back and says, listen, I'm not giving you anything. Ben-Hadad, responds with bluster, and then King of Israel shoots back and says, a warrior, who's putting on his pants shouldn't be bragging like the battle's over. I mean, it's just that kind of thing, man. It's just two guys, idiots, arguing back and forth. Oh yeah, you want a piece of this? You want a piece of me? I mean, it's literally that sort of thing. And so at this point, this is interesting. A certain prophet. Now, as you read chapter 20, I want you to pay attention to this constant interruption of the prophets. Now, I think part of the way this chapter functions in the story of Elijah, even though Elijah's not in it, is that it sort of blows a hole in Elijah's whole deal, where when Elijah gets depressed and he cries and whines and says he's the only one, and God says, well, actually, you're not the only one at all. I got 7,000, that I can just think of off the top of my head. And this chapter is just a glorious reminder that, Elijah, we don't even know where he is, but the prophetic role is being well represented here. So first off, a certain prophet in verse 13 and 14. I think later was like verse 28, there's going to be a man of God. And then 35 to 42, we got a whole company of prophets. So this chapter is just, running over with prophets. So again, it goes back to Elijah's tendency when he gets depressed to say, woe is me, I'm the only one. Like dude, you are not the only one. And so this certain prophet comes to see King Ahab and brings him the word of the Lord. I think this is really interesting. Ahab is sort of portrayed in this whole saga as a guy whose power is sort of questionable. I mean, he's in a position of great power, and he seems to have a lot of power at his disposal, but individually, he doesn't seem to be a very powerful man. And so at this point, the certain prophet, not even named, just a certain prophet comes in. Notice how this certain prophet, he tells the king the word of the Lord. He also gives the king the strategy for war, and he seems to dispatch the king for war. So there's this wonderful undercurrent in this chapter of how you got the kings out here talking tough, and they're out there, with all their bluster, but at the same time, it really seems to be these prophets that are not under control of the king. They listen only to the word of the Lord, and it's amazing how the prophets here, in many, many ways, seem to have connection to the source of real power, and it's not King Ahab, So right there, we have this first victory over Syria, victory over Aram in verses 13 to 21. But even at the end of that, the prophet says, yeah, he's going to be back. That was a nice battle and all, but he's going to be back. Notice how they defeated him, because I think it's funny. Again, we started out with King Ben-Hadad with, 32 allied kings, and you think, whoa, man, what a powerful, force. But then it turns out all they do is get together and drink, And so all the army of Israel had to do was attack them, in the middle of the day, because they're all going to be drunk, so they're just a bunch of, drunk rednecks. And so they beat them, but they're going to come back. And so sure enough, there's a second attack that we find right there in verses 23 and on through about 30. This time, but Ben-Hadad's thinking, yeah, Israel's God, he's like a mountain God. Maybe he's heard of Mount Sinai and God's, wonders and revelations upon some of the mountains. He's thinking, yeah, what we need to do is get them out there on flat ground, because apparently their God, he's no good, when the ground is flat, because that's all dumb. But it's what Ben-Hadad is thinking. We're going to have to get them on flat ground, because that's the only place we can beat them. At first, again, once more, it looks like maybe they have the upper hand. They seem to have the Israelites outnumbered. But then once more, verse 28, a man of God comes to the king of Israel and says, hey, I'm going to defeat this vast army for you, then you're going to know I am the Lord. Again, every time the kings make their move, the prophets intervene and sort of change the way everything turns out, because honestly, it's God who is in control. Well, What follows there in verses 31 to 34 is this weird treaty. King Ahab ends up winning decisively. Ben-Hadad, ends up, completely defeated. So here he is now. They've already defeated him, and so he ends up pleading to King Ahab for mercy. And sort of inexplicably, King Ahab cuts a deal, makes a new treaty with this guy that he just completely destroyed. Remember how Ben-Hadad in the beginning, why are we doing this guy any favors? But that's what Ahab does, which brings us to the very last part of this chapter. I know I seem to be going on forever. Verses 35 to 43, there's this last scene with one more prophet. This is really funny. He comes up to, it's like, now we got a bunch of prophets, a company of prophets, and one of them comes up to another and says, hey man, dude, hit me. I want you to hit me. Hit me in the face as hard as you can. And guys, I can't hit you in the face. And he says, well, God wanted you to hit me in the face. So because you didn't hit me in the face, you're going to be killed by a lion. Sure enough, man, it gets killed by a lion. I guess the moral of that story is if somebody ask you to hit him, I'm kidding. So he goes up to the next guy and says, hey, hit me in the face. The whole deal is he wants to appear before the king of Israel and look like, he's been just come out of a bloody fight, right? So he needs somebody to bloody him up. So the second guy says, dude, that's the dumbest thing anybody's ever asked me to do. But, and then he just pops him in the mouth. And so now the guy's bloodied up. Looks like he just came out of battle. What I find here is really interesting. We're starting on Sunday a new series at Woodburn on parables. And I just want you to notice that here's a parable here. The prophet wants to indict King Ahab for his guilt for not destroying King Ben-Hadad. So notice he tells this parable. It's just like when Nathan confronts David, because Ahab, he tells him a story. He's like, oh man, my head. I had this prisoner from the war, and then I turned around to send my wife a text on my iPhone, and he got away. And, King Ahab's like, well, then you deserve whatever's coming to you, because honestly, if you let a prisoner of war get away, you either have to pay the penalty or face death. And so King Ahab says, well, you know what the sentence. King Ahab passes the sentence. You're probably gonna have to face the music there. You're probably gonna have to die. And that's when the prophet quickly pulls off his wig and his glasses and says, yeah, you're the man. This is what the Lord says. Because you spared the man that was supposed to be destroyed, now you're gonna die in his place. That's verse 42. And then verse 43. So the king of Israel goes home angry and sullen. Okay, you're going to see this as a pattern. I'll see you on Monday morning in chapter 21. Ahab, like I said, he seems to be kind of this weak king. And chapter 21, you're going to see him. He is, at the end of chapter 43, this great king in battle, he is whining like a baby. He goes home and pouts. And oh my goodness, in chapter 21, he's going to do some more pouting. But anyway, that's King Ahab. Again, it's this whole section in the story of Elijah that's got no Elijah in it. But what we've had now is a reminder that there are plenty of prophets speaking for the Lord. And at the same time now, we have a curse hanging over the head of King Ahab. And we're going to see that come to its fulfillment. So anyway, good week in the Word. I love you guys so much. I will see you Monday morning, 10 o'clock, Lord willing, for 10 with Tim. Have a great weekend. I'll see you perhaps on Sunday morning here at Woodburn, 8, 9:30, or 11. If not, then again, Monday morning, I will see you then. Love you guys so very much. Thank you so much